Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Transfer Flow. On today's episode, Neil Shalat and I will talk to you about what midfielders you should be watching in Europe this season and where they're destined to go. Villarreal signs a winger with a college soccer background to help them in the Champions League. Why is he the right fit for their style of play? And lastly, Neil tells us about Serie A's youngest ever striker and what he can do in the future to help fix the Italian national team. All that and more on this episode of the Transfer Flow. All right, we are back for another episode of the Transfer Flow. I am again joined by Neil Shalat. Neil, how are you doing today?
Well, very good. Great to join you once again. It's like the old London bushes cliche. We waited so long for one episode, and then we now have two back to back. So, yeah, very excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. We kind of went through a lot of the Premier League teams and things to watch, maybe how to get on board on some of these trends. But today, I think we want to shift that a little bit and start to talk about some players that could be piquing people's interest in the top five leagues this year. So I think a starting place will be in the midfield. And the first one that we're going to do is a player for a team that's close to my heart, which is Oscar Gloukh, he's a Israeli attacking midfielder who's had sort of two really strong seasons at Red Bull Salzburg. He's now making the jump to the Eredivisie, looking to hopefully push on in European football as well. Neil, what are your kind of initial thoughts about the player and what makes him a candidate to be a breakout player this year for Ajax?
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the standouts for RB Salzburg last year, wasn't he? And I mean, for me, the main thing I'm kind of interested to see is how he's going to translate from Salzburg to Ajax. Which, of course, one, I mean, there's a slight difference in the competitive level between the Austrian Bundesliga and Eredivisie, but more so, it's the kind of different kind of system he's going to find himself in, right? Because Salzburg have, a fairly unique way of playing. I mean, obviously, there's a lot made of like the Red Bull style of play, and certainly we've spoken about Leipzig last season, trying to shift away from that and having their issues. But Salzburg pretty much did stick to it, and so Glauch had this interesting role where he, on paper, started on the left side as a left winger, left midfielder in a the typical 4-2-2-2, but obviously came inside quite a bit and basically operated in those like internal central areas of that left side. And he certainly had a pretty good season: 10 goals, 5 assists in the league, a few assists in the Champions League as well, and obviously also played in the Club World Cup, and I think had a goal in one of the games in the group stage. So from there moving up to Ajax now, who, let's say, play a more kind of traditional kind of system, regardless of who the head coach is. It'll be interesting to see what sort of a role he plays and how he does. Obviously, you expect will be in like a central midfield kind of position. He's not a left winger. He's pretty much an attacking midfielder. But how he does in like a more traditional role will be interesting, because I mean that's probably what the top teams will be looking at, right? Like if they're monitoring him, if they think he's someone they might want to keep an eye on and potentially sign in a couple of years, they'll want to see how he does. So yeah, that's what I'm most interested in. But yeah, what do you think are his kind of standout qualities? Because for me, the first thing when I see him is like his ball striking with both feet is really really good. But what else do you think makes him such an exciting player?
Yeah, I think he's got a lot of different traits that are pretty standout. He's a small guy. He's not a guy that's very sort of like, he's not small and stocky. He's little, he's quick. He's very two-footed, which I think is exciting. You sort of talked about him coming inside and picking the ball up in pockets. For this Ajax team, I think you're right. I think they'll try to play with more sort of direct wingers that will look to dribble and take on fullbacks. Mika Götze, Bertrand Traore. Berghuis will probably still play some minutes on the right wing this season. He's sort of been the starter to kick off the campaign. I think the idea here is to have more of a true playmaker in the middle of the field. This Ajax team has sort of played more with kind of different shades of eights, kind of for the last couple of seasons. I think Api Nouri was a player that Ajax tragically lost sort of years ago, and they haven't really had that profile since of this sort of player with tight control, player that can dribble past people, carry the ball upfield, receive it in tight spaces, combine with other players, and then show off that two-footed shooting ability in and around the box. So there's a lot to be excited about. He's still kind of integrating into the team, but I think for people looking at playmakers across Europe, this is a player who moved for similar money to Jonathan Rowe, who moved from Norwich City to Marseille, and as well
And
as
will be moving
Alcaraz,
again.
who moved to Everton this year. So yes,
Let's not go
uh,
there.
as maybe is the case right now with this Everton team. But so we'll see. So this is I think attacking option here. This is a real playmaker, someone hopefully that can break down teams in not just low blocks, but also in the middle block, that he can receive the ball in these tight spaces and use this sort of passing range with 2 feet to spring the attackers or play off of Wout Weghorst, this big target man who can hold the ball up in there. So yeah, how do you sort of see him? So obviously, right now he's come into the team, he's getting integrated. I think we see a lot of times coaches will play the older, more experienced players who kind of get up to speed quickly because they know what it takes in preseason and to get themselves ready for the matches, but also who can follow the tactical instructions really well. How do you see Glauc sort of earning his place in this team moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and it's going to be a case of him kind of gradually getting that spot over the course of the season. But I mean, I do think there definitely is a space for him, as you say. Like if you look at Ajax's kind of midfield composition, obviously, as you say, with Berghaus, he's kind of used more as a winger. But out of the rest, like is like a bit of a hole in terms of either like a very creative number 8 or even a pure number 10, which is somewhere where Oscar Gloukh is. And I mean, I didn't watch the match, but just looking at the lineup from their first league game, or the second, the recent league game against Go Ahead Eagles, a 2-2 draw, their midfield was Davy Klaassen, Kenneth Taylor, and Yorti Mokio. And when you look at these three guys, all of them to me are like guys you could probably put in like a double pivot and have a number 10 in front of them. So, it could be any combination of those three plus Glauch, forming like a midfield three. I think that's one of the ways where it works. And obviously, from in different games, it depends. Who you exactly want to pick. But for the most part, especially against lower table Eredivisie teams where Ajax will dominate the ball, will dominate territory, you want to have someone like Glauch who can have a moment of brilliance in him, or just unlock the game with like his creativity, or even like a shot from range. So yeah, there does look to be a spot for the taking for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm really excited to see him come into this team. Like you're saying, there's a lot of these 8 profiles, guys that can do a lot of running, are comfortable getting on the ball, but maybe aren't that sort of final pass. Davy Klaassen for years for Ajax was a box crashing kind of number 10. There's maybe he kind of alternates between doing that role to a little bit less of a physical degree and then also sometimes just being a 6. He sort of filled in for Henderson, sort of in this leadership role, kind of dictating the rest of the play around him, holding space, things like that. So still a space in there. Fitzjim is a kind of crafty little dribbler in there who can take players on, but I think is a little bit of a player that's still finding his spot in that team. Where Kenneth Taylor is the established pro, does a lot of the running load, and is very combative in there, as well as popped up with key goals sort of down the stretch for Ajax last year. Was probably one of the strongest players in the whole team. So I think that's one to keep an eye on, this sort of attacking player that can add a new dimension to the team. Let's move on to a different player, maybe of the players that we'll talk about today, one of the more established pros, but I'm talking about Javi Guerra, who's played for Valencia this year. He's sort of a bit of a different profile. Neel, how do you sort of see this player, and what makes him so appealing in the top 5 leagues?
Yeah, so as you say, Javi Guerra is someone who is much more of an established player, but he's still, I mean, on the younger side. He's 2003 born, so still under 23, and he is an interesting one because with many of the young players we'll be looking at, and also Kim did a newsletter on I think Tuesday where she pointed out a bunch of kind of exciting players to watch from the Champions League qualifiers who, as she said, had like big raiders in not so great leagues. But Guerra is different, where he's obviously playing in a very strong league, La Liga, and playing for a team which isn't one of the strongest. I mean, often relegation battlers, they have the potential to do more, but there's all sorts of issues around the club, as many people will know. So he has had to do a very different kind of a job. And so, with many of the other guys we'll talk about who are like, extremely exciting on the ball and super creative, Guerra is kind of different, where he has to do a lot of like defensive work. He has to do a lot of kind of like deeper, less I would say less eye-catching work. But he's done a fantastic job, I think, for Valencia for the last couple of seasons, since he's been kind of a regular in the team. And to me, what I like is he has kind of good like defensive coverage in deeper areas. He's not like the most well built guy as well. He's, I think, not super tall, and also doesn't have like a super strong frame. FBref has his weight at under 70 kilos, or which is like about 150 odd pounds, give or take. But he uses his body well to shield the ball, so he's pretty press resistant when he kind of receives the ball well. And he can also he carries quite well. He likes to carry through central spaces and get forward a bit. So he has all of these kind of qualities. Obviously he has to do some defensive work just because of the kind of team he plays in, but also gets forward well in kind of a box to box role. Gets towards the box, has some late runs in his locker. Can pop up with a few goals from maybe like cutbacks, stuff like that. So there's a lot of kind of qualities there which you can see, and suggest that he has the potential to be a useful player for maybe a team with a slightly higher stature or higher competitive level. But I think this season is actually going to be very interesting to see both Valencia and Guerra, because this is the first season with Carlos Corberán in charge. He came in about midway through last season. He was at West Brom in the championship before. And like I said, with Valencia, they have the potential to do more, but they've always been kind of relegation battlers, and they've also played that way for the most part in recent years. But Corberan is someone who does like to like impose a possession game when he can on his teams, and we did see some kind of improvement from Valencia over the course of last season, where they finished comfortably ahead of the relegation battle. So now with a full preseason and a full season up ahead, it's going to be interesting to see how much of those kind of West Brom kind of ideas we see from Corberan at Valencia. And in that kind of a case, what kind of a role Guerra has. Because one of the things which I feel he can improve, and also when you look at his numbers, one of the things which doesn't look that great is his passing in general. I mean, he does pop up with like a few kind of creative passes in the final third with those, but that's mostly through the movement. But with the ball at his feet, he's not a super progressive passer, not even a super secure passer. His completion rate's like below 80% from the last season. So that's kind of the main aspect I think teams will want to see, besides the kind of obviously stature limitations which I mentioned. But otherwise, like with his carrying, he's already really really good. So if he can add a bit to his passing game, I think you're looking at a pretty well-rounded player there. What have you made of him?
Yeah, I think we want to see the player step into a bit of like a deeper lying playmaking kind of role. He's a player that shows himself to be that sort of what I've heard a lot of coaches call like the first receiver. So when the back line has the ball, he's the one who's making himself available through the lines there. I think the dribbling is part of what makes him such a sexy candidate, is that he has the ability to just look like he's going to pass and then all of a sudden sort of burst forward. For a midfielder that we're talking about that doesn't appear super powerful or explosive, he's a guy that has a bit more of the like quickness and acceleration than maybe just the run around all the time kind of midfielder. He actually does have a bit more of that than maybe meets the eye, I think, initially. And I think he does have traits. Like there are lots of moments where you see him passing the ball and you go, this guy does have passing range. He's taking looks at things, but he's not like the consistent guy that's just moving you up the field, completing like a pretty good pass to a safe option, but moves you up the field and sort of gets you into more advanced positions. He is a guy that is looking for sort of from deeper areas passes that will really light the game up, and because of that, he does end up with more turnovers. And he isn't really your sort of uh, like he does, because he likes to operate in these deeper areas. That does take away a little bit from what he does in the final third. But when he gets there, like he does look like he can be a creator in the final third because of that ability to execute difficult passes. So I think it's a little bit on coaching and framework. And I wonder a coach like Corberán that has a history of being very structured, of creating clear roles and expectations, if that can really start to elevate his game and take what I think is clearly both obvious technical traits, and execution is maybe the thing that can be worked on, but also has enough of these physical traits that makes you think there's a player in here that could make a jump. We were sort of speaking a little bit before we started here and saying, you know, there are teams here that we've said for a long time, like, you guys need a midfielder that can pass a ball, that won't cost you a fortune. These are good risks to be taking in and around the sort of, you know, 15 to 25 million kind of mark. Tottenham Hotspur, Man United, you guys need guys that can pass the ball. This is sort of the kind of guy, when we talk about that a team like that could maybe take a chance on, or we would have liked to see a team like that do this early in the window, get this player in. I think for Valencia, we'll see with their financial situation, but for Carlos Corberán, I think this is the type of player that he'll be like really hoping they can hold on to help elevate the team this year. And like we're saying, with a bit of structure, maybe get the most out of him moving forward. So if Neil, if that's a good spot for you, let's move on to a different player here who I think there's maybe people will start to be familiar with, and if they're not right now, I think it's pretty clear that they will be soon. And I'm talking about Ayyoub Bouaddi, who is a midfielder playing for Lille. Still, this really, I mean, if we're just going to start off the like base level, he's like a skinny guy. He's really, really young. Why should people be excited about this player? Why should they start making time to put Lille in their viewing schedule?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, he's really really young. He's actually born in 2007, and he's still not 18. So he's going to turn 18 in October. But he's already really really good as well. I think. I mean, he has already earned the trust of his coach Bruno Genesio by the looks of the games he played last season. So he joined the Lille Academy in 2021. In 2023, he made his debut in the Europa Conference League, becoming the youngest player to ever appear in a European club men's competition, and then soon also got his Liga debut. And then last season, he had 24 appearances in Liga, 9 starts, just over 1,000 minutes. So based on that, Hayden, how many minutes do you think he might have had in the Champions League? If he's got just over 1,000 in Liga, what would you say you'd expect to see from him in the Champions League?
Yeah, for a team that's not going crazy far, I think you'd expect to see maybe, yeah, for a guy that's playing that kind of minutes, maybe 250, 300 minutes, something like that. Half of the group stage kind of thing, something in there.
Yeah, but he actually got 600 minutes. So, pretty much double of your estimation. And that's 9 appearances. And he started the big games. I mean, he even started against Real Madrid. So, he was obviously someone who, again, is young. You have to obviously be careful with his development. But he's someone who clearly Genesio trusted for the biggest games, for the maybe the toughest games. And I think it's pretty easy to see why. So I guess again maybe let's just quickly talk about how Lille play and kind of set the framework for the role he has. So they play usually in a 4-2-3-1 formation on paper. Usually Benjamin Andre, who's a pretty experienced guy, other side of 30, is there in that midfield double pivot, and he's the more of a kind of the holding player. He's the one who's more positionally disciplined, and helps protect the center backs, keep things ticking in the center. But around him, there's some fun guys. There's Ngalael Mukau as well, who's 20 years old, who's a bit of a different profile, but also an exciting youngster. There's Ethan Mbappe, Kylian Mbappe's younger brother. Further up, there's Håkan Haraldsson as well, Icelandic youngster who's also a fun guy in more of an attacking midfield kind of role. But Ward is usually starting alongside Andre, like I said, on the left side of that double pivot, and he has the freedom to drift around, even push up a little bit or pull wide, because in possession they like to move to a back three quite often, so it'll become like a three box three kind of shape, with one full back staying deep, the other one pushing up, and so Buadi then has what I kind of like to call like a connector kind of a role, where he's sometimes receiving the ball from the back, and his job is to get it further up the field. So I think he's really excellent at that. I mean, you mentioned about like Guerra being a first receiver kind of guy. Buadi is, for me, one of his standout traits is just how good he is in tight spaces, receiving the ball and also escaping from them, right? He's not going to get trapped too often. He's got, as you say, he's not like the strongest when you look at his like frame, but he already uses it really well to kind of have like feints and just wriggle his way out, and obviously has excellent like technical ability, close control, and so he's excellent at that. And then his passing traits are interesting because how of the areas he kind of picks the ball up in, which are typically deeper or even wider, he actually attempts more like medium range passes than short passes. So he's not someone who's kind of linking up in like short spaces and quickly like moving ahead. He's usually looking for those more kind of forward balls, or of course even sideways diagonal stuff like that. And even he doesn't try that many long balls, but I think that's more of a kind of a security option, because he's at over 90% in terms of long ball completion. So what I like really about him is his maturity and his like decision making with these passes, where he tends to select these kind of secure passes, but not just like super short, gets the ball moving a decent bit but also retains it. So that's one very exciting quality. And with all of this, like, he's excellent at connecting play in the midfield third, but he hasn't shown much in the attacking third. Again, that's obviously the role in the team as well, where his job is to just connect more than kind of produce in the final third. But maybe that's one thing that people might want to see more of this season. But then the other thing is out of possession. So the way Lille play is they like to have more of the ball, and they become like pretty expansive. Their back three in possession kind of stretches a fair bit. The front five pushes up really high, so it's pretty big spaces there. And what I like about Buardi is he really gets around, and he really helps like cover on the rest defense a lot. So he makes a lot of like tracking runs against counter attackers. Gets there, takes the ball away from them, is pretty good at tackling, but I think he can be a little bit kind of I don't know if like over exuberant is the right word, but like when they're defending in a block, I feel he's maybe sometimes a bit prone to getting pulled out, getting dragged away. And I think he needs to just improve maybe like his composure and positioning in those kind of situations a bit more. So if you look at his like defensive stats, and obviously like the raw defensive numbers always need contextualizing, but you'll see that he's very high for tackles, so he's 3.07 tackles per 90, but he's like just around one interception and around one block. So he's getting around, he's chasing people, he's taking the ball off them a lot, but he's not actually holding his position so well and kind of anticipating to stop passes from being played. So that's probably like where I'm at with the player. But like I said, he's not 18 yet, and the fact that he's doing all of this for a top four challenging. I mean, they finished fifth last season, but one of the stronger teams in Liga, I think, should say a lot about his quality. And yeah, like this season, he didn't. Again, he played like he had 9 starts last season, just over 1,000 minutes. At least double this season, maybe even more. But I think he's set for a big season. What have you made of him, Hayden? Because I know you've been looking at some secret numbers. So what have you seen in those?
Yeah, I think in terms of watching the player aesthetically, I think he almost jumps out a little bit more with the ball than you see in some of the numbers. And I think it's because he's, like you're saying, he's that connector. He plays sort of safe passes. He leaves the responsibility of taking the risk to the more senior players, which I think when I look at the player's data, I almost see a guy that is like a really model pro. I look at a guy and go, yeah, this guy really is trying to do what the coach is saying. He's listening to the senior players. He's doing some of the running for them. Defensively, I think he wants to show his willingness to bite and be combative. He When he defends and even when he attacks, when you're talking about his ball control in these tight spaces, I would love to see Bouaddi as a younger player. Even I'm obviously very young now, but I'd love to see what he could do in the futsal cages and things like that, because the way he plays, his ability to sort of dance out of people when there's two or three defenders in a tight space, you're like, this looks like a player that has played in indoor or futsal and things like that. And then the way he defends, he likes to get really close to people. So this is a guy that, like, again, doesn't have the biggest frame. I think, again, for a young player, looks like he has the athleticism already to compete for a top team in Ligue 1. But this isn't a guy that just wants to chase or will engage when a player gets close to him. He wants to go out, initiate contact, get close, be the player to jump out and engage, and really show that. And he's not scared of the opponents in that way. He's not scared of someone taking him on, and he trusts his ability to do that. So I think, yeah, he wants to he plays it safe on offense almost so that he can take those risks on defense and show off that combativeness that I'm sure is part of what has gotten him in this team, that has him, beside an older guy that can take responsibility with the ball but maybe needs some support in that young fight that Bouaddi maybe has. I completely agree. I think we haven't seen the best from him yet, and what we've seen has been really interesting. I think as he continues to get more confident, as he gets these reps at a higher level, his game is going to continue to grow and expand.
Yeah, and also I want to add, like, what I mentioned, and what you said as well about his defensive tendencies. I think it's not a case of like him not having it in his locker to be more disciplined, but like you said, it's more a case of him kind of trying to show that bite and that aggressive intent off the ball. But when I watched, like, for example, against Real Madrid, where Lille, like, they changed their system. I think they were defending 5-3-2 to obviously contain them. And in that game, I was really impressed by like his maturity and the way he stayed in his positions, the way he pretty much perfectly executed his role. So I think he definitely has that in his locker. And as you say, like, he looks like someone who really takes on board all the instructions he gets. So I think that's not really a big concern for me. It's just something you'd want to see maybe improved on this season. But yeah, like, he's someone who he's not even 18 yet, but I can confidently say that he pretty much has all the qualities you want to see in someone who's going to the top. So yeah, super super exciting player. I think I read a piece by Hugh Davis of Scouted earlier this summer, arguing that someone like Arsenal should sign him. I don't know what you think. I mean, Arsenal, I think this was before they signed Nergard. Like, I wouldn't get on board with that now, but certainly from his point of view, and also probably from Arsenal's point of view. But do you have a club in mind, Hidden, where you think, one of the top clubs which should be looking at him, maybe obviously not this summer now, but maybe next summer, to kind of give him a pathway to obviously regular minutes, but then also competing at the top level?
Yeah, the Arsenal one is really interesting because it's one where I would go, it's not necessarily the guy they need to add to their team,
Yeah.
but he fits the profile of the guy that Arteta
I
would
mean,
go
Arteta would
for, right?
love him.
Like
He would
these
love
these
him.
com- these competitive midfielders that follow instructions. So yeah, so Arsenal actually is the team that I would have said, because I go, well, right now it feels like Arteta gets the guys that he wants, and this is a guy that he would definitely watch video of and be sort of like really excited to work with. Outside of that, I think I want to see a little bit. Like I would imagine that there are a lot of top teams that will send scouts to watch him this year, knowing what he did last year, to see how he progresses and see what
Yeah.
he adds. And sort of they might almost have on their list, if he starts to add this in the final third, we just go for him immediately in January. Or if he adds this little bit defensively, again, not just being able to jump, but also being able to sit in when they have the lead and duel and do that kind of thing, then we go for him immediately. I wouldn't be surprised if there are other top teams that are looking in this space. I don't really know how Bayern Munich are looking to shape a rebuild. I was kind of thinking that, like, there are
That's an
German
interesting one.
teams right now, like, but not just Bayern Munich. Obviously, Bayern Munich are the big dogs in Germany. I don't know how they want to rebuild their midfield, but I know Company, again, comes from this Guardiola coaching tree. Will want that kind of combative midfielder that's coachable. But even looking down a bit further, I do wonder if Leverkusen, who are reshaping a lot of their team, he fits a lot of what Eintracht Frankfurt want, especially out of possession. That's a team that's continued to make smart moves and goes for young players. So I think there's a number of options. Germany is interesting. I think there'd be almost an intermediate step or a bit of time before he'd go to an Arsenal or a top Premier League team, because the most important thing for these guys is getting minutes and getting reps and being able to build that sort of game and reputation. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a really big success for Lille this season. That's the really more interesting one. I don't think this is a guy that's moving imminently, and I think the spot that he's in right now is actually a perfect spot for his development. You mentioned some of these players and profiles around him. I think that's part of also what makes it so exciting, is that he's in a place that complements his game really well right now. And we've sort of talked about this a little bit, Neil. If we're gonna segue a little bit here to a different player, different league, and different role, but we've talked about Oscar Gloukh coming into Ajax and adding a little bit of a different dimension to their attack. Two-footed, can hold the ball in tight spaces, can carry the ball and burst forward. We've talked about Bouaddi adding this defensive element to Lille and growing into a role as a top pro. We've talked about Guerra, who can maybe, with a bit of structure, grow into being this deep lying playmaker that is both has the ability to explode and carry the ball and do something in the final third, but can continue to move his team up the field more regularly. I think a really interesting one is on Rodrigo Mora, who's attacking midfielder at FC Porto. He's sort of had this breakout year scoring lots of goals. This is a young guy that all of a sudden sort of burst onto the scene a little bit, but they have a new coach in the building, and there's questions on how that style is going to fit, how that player is going to adapt to that sort of change. What do you think about the player, and what can you tell us a little bit about what has changed at Porto since he was sort of scoring those goals last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should start with Moran. Like, he's a super, super exciting talent. He's also 2007 born, so that's good for all the people who are feeling old already. But he's been kind of in the Porto Academy since 2016. He's kind of come through the age groups and obviously been a huge, huge standout. I remember watching him in the UEFA Youth League, where he was like clearly the main guy in their team, and also for the Portugal youth setups. But since I think 2023 was around when he made his debut, and then since then he's been getting kind of regular minutes. But 24 was clearly his breakthrough. 24-25 was clearly his breakthrough season, where he became a pretty like regular starter towards the end of the campaign. So Porto had a fair few coaching changes. I mean, there's all sorts of issues at that club as well, also behind the scenes with like elections and presidents and stuff like that. So it's a whole story. But it, as far as coaches go, so they started off the season with, I think, Vitor Bruno, and they ended it with Martin Anselmi, who was at Cruz Azul before in Mexico, and then moved over to Europe. So it was, I think, under Anselmi. I mean, he started to get minutes under Bruno, but under Anselmi is when he kind of became this really especially standout guy in the team for me. And that was because they played kind of like a back three, a double pivot in midfield, and then allowed Mora to be like this free roaming inside forward / number 10, where he really shone in that role. And I mean, he's someone who, I mean, like I was saying to you before, is like a pure number 10, right? Like, he wants the ball at his feet, and he can pretty much make magic with it, right? He weaves through like also any kind of tight spaces. Unbelievable. Like, the ball's glued to him pretty much wherever he's going. And I think he receives the ball well, especially like when it's coming in from that right side onto his left foot, and then he can obviously turn, get away from people and then make his magic. But yeah, the funny thing, like when you think about like this kind of a pure number 10, you're like, okay, so excellent like ball control, weaves through tight spaces, great dribbler, all of that. And then you're like, okay, so then after all that, he probably creates a bit. Well, he had 0.09 expected assists per 90 last season, because the guy, I don't think he's been taught about the concept of passing a lot. I mean, I was talking to my friend Alex Barker. He was watching Porto for something else, but he was like, I was like, when he was watching them, he was like, I was infuriated at this number 10. Like, why the hell is he not passing the ball? And I told him, he's a literal child. You're talking about a child here. I was like, oh, okay. But so that's pretty much the clear thing he needs to improve in his game. Because he gets into those positions as well, right? He gets into a lot of those like zone 14 kind of area, which we say, just outside the box, where there's definitely potential for some nice slip passes to be played. Not even necessarily key passes, but the pre-assist kind of pass. But yeah, with his right foot, he is quite. I mean, he does have 4 assists from last season. So I don't want to be like he never passes the ball. But yeah, with his left foot, he's also like a pretty good shooter. He got double digits for league goals last season. and I think he's got good technique, not necessarily like pure power, but he gets some good curl on his shots and tends to place them well for the most part. So yeah, very exciting player. Would be cool if he learns passing, but the problem is that Francesco Farioli loves passing, maybe a bit too much for Mora's good, because I'm just concerned about how he's going to fit in Farioli's typical 4-3-3 system, where he's very much looking for two like passing number eights. And sure, obviously, he'd like to see a bit of creativity, but the more important thing for him, it seems, is kind of security, retention, and not so much like risk taking, right? And like I said, Mora's shown in that pure number 10 kind of a role, when there was like a double pivot behind him, wing backs running on his side, all of that. I don't know if, I mean, he's not going to get that in this kind of Farioli system. And yeah, first game of the season, I think or rather, first two games of the season this time around, he was benched. I think only got about 13 minutes of one appearance. Obviously, still a long way to go, but like just the tactical fit doesn't seem to add up for me right now. And as you were saying earlier, I mean, he's just turned 18. For these guys, the main thing is regular game time, right? And if Mora can't get it at Porto, you wonder, because again, like I said, he's been at the academy for almost 10 years. It's like a boyhood club kind of situation. So it's not even as easy as, okay, we'll just leave and go, because like obviously he has a big attachment with the fans already. So it's going to be an interesting situation to follow. But what do you make of this, Hayden? Because obviously you'll know Farioli quite well from his Ajax time. So do you think there's a way this might work?
Yeah, I think there's some traits in the player that make him appealing to Farioli, because I think for a guy that likes to give me the ball in the box and I will put it in the back of the goal. I'm not going to give it to someone else. I'm going to score myself. I can do it with both feet. His ball control when he's in and around the box, like he's not just a one-footed guy. Like he'll bounce the ball between 2 feet.
Yeah.
He's happy to turn and feel pressure on his back. He's really comfortable in these tight spaces in the box. He gets good shots away, different variety of shots. So he obviously adds that component in attack, but he works hard defensively. This isn't a guy that you
Yeah.
sometimes you see we talk about playmaking number 10s, because when I watch the player aesthetically, some of his most exciting moments remind me of when Joao Felix was playing at Benfica. The way he would just sort of glide through these big senior defenders. A lot of times, obviously, with the Portuguese language, you get these big physical Brazilian center backs in there, guys that are really physical. And this little kid with Felix used to just weave through them and create chances at sort of will. And with Mora, you see that ability in and around the box. But he's not a guy that gets on the ball a lot. He's not making tons and tons of runs to get the ball. And it's still, I think it's not just the passing he needs to add to his game. It's figuring out the timing of his movement to then get on the ball to do the passing a little bit.
Yeah.
Like he really has played this role where it's like, stay out of the way and then we'll get you the ball in the box and you take care of business there a little bit. But he does do the work defensively, which I think for Farioli will be important. Again, Farioli, not the manager that always wants the highest pressing. I don't think Mora is necessarily the guy that has to press in that specific way, but he does have the effort and the willingness to do it. This isn't just like a playmaker who waits for the game to come to the final third and then he comes alive. He does contribute on the other side of the ball. So he may find himself in the team. We'll see if they do something along the lines of turning into a back three where Mora is sort of nominally a winger defensively. But then when they come into possession, they have a wing back go high and he comes inside, something
Yeah.
like that. That's sort of the option that sort of you most likely see that gets him in the team. But really, a team that's playing like a 4-2-3-1 with him as the 10, that's the shape that he wants. That's the shape I think that he's more comfortable in, or a 3-5-2 maybe. But I think that's the shape that he will most want to play in. And I think teams that are really intelligent or play with that kind of profile, they do well to keep an eye on him and how much he sort of is playing for Farioli, because he could be one that they move for. Like off the top of my head, immediately I'm like, you know, like how many times have Wolverhampton Wanderers watched this guy already? I'm asking the question a little bit. We'll
Well,
have to see.
it's probably a lot because he's in Portugal, so they probably watched him a lot.
I would imagine he's the kind of guy that they have a poster of already or something like that. But I think there's a number of teams that will want this kind of profile, especially teams that have to defend and then want a little bit of quality for the few times they do end up getting forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, like, what you said. I also thought of like RB Leipzig. I mean, obviously they've had a fair few changes, but you're thinking of replacing Xavi Simons. Obviously, not a like for like replacement, different profiles in many ways, but someone who can do that kind of a job where you get him the ball and he'll do damage for you in the final third. So yeah, I think that there's a fair few who maybe even like by January, depending on how it goes, and if he's just being constantly benched, maybe even by January you might be able to tempt him with a good offer, or certainly maybe next summer. So yeah, interesting situation here.
I, I think of all the players we talked about, he's the one that I'm most excited to revisit. Like I think Glauc may take a little bit of time at Ajax, and because he's just moved, he will essentially be there. Buadi, I think, is primed for a breakout year where he will
Yeah.
stay. Guerra, I think, again, depend if a team came in with an offer, I think that might be difficult for Valencia to turn down. But I haven't heard of anything imminent, at least. So if the player stays, then he might be likely to stay. With Mora, he feels like the guy that we need to put on our list to revisit come January and come later this year, depending on if he's playing, then what is he doing and what does it look like? He's probably had to add something new to his
Yeah.
game, or if he's not playing, then who are the teams that we've seen at that stage in the season that he's a great fit for, that they should really be opening up the checkbook to get this guy in. So I completely agree. I love the RB Leipzig shout, by the way. I think you can really easily see a team where Openda runs in behind and he's sort of underneath picking up the ball for these early and behind crosses and things like that, and still contributes to the defensive side of it. So that's a really good shout. I hadn't thought about that one, but I really like that as a potential fit. Um, let's move away from the midfield. We've talked about a lot of different profiles of midfielders, but a profile that never goes out of style is always strikers, and especially strikers that are very fast. If you are fast and you are a striker, then people want to watch you play football because the potential is really high. Um, that being said, for a lot of players, we talk about these guys who are breaking through, young players. They're playing at the top academies. Not everyone is able to play for those top academies. So the player we want to talk about right now is Tani Oluwaseyi. And Oluwaseyi is a Canadian striker, Nigerian-born Canadian striker. Played university football in the States for St. Joseph's. And I don't know. He did college. He got drafted into MLS. He wasn't an immediate star. He got loaned out into USL, the sort of second division, sort of in the US, or third division, depending on how you look at it, and has kind of come back into a Minnesota team. And with some of the shape of how the team plays, which we'll talk about in a sec, he's burst onto the scene and sort of become a star. And now he's linked with a over 7 million euro move to Villarreal as a 25-year-old striker. So Neel, I'm not sure how familiar you are. I've worked in the league and worked against this player, so I know this player quite well. But it's a very interesting story. What have you seen on the player, and what are your sort of initial thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to lead on this one because this is, like I said, not my area of expertise. But I do know a bit about Minnesota United because they're a very interesting team. When I've seen their like stats and when I've watched them as well. Uh, they. I mean, like I think I should just quickly. It's a bit of a sidebar, but I think we should say like, especially I as an outsider, maybe there's more weight in me saying it. Like MLS is actually like a super interesting league just with like the diversity of teams in terms of styles. Like you get a lot of tactical diversity, which I think is sometimes underrated because people look at it and be like, oh yeah, the playoff format and like half the league goes to playoffs and all that, which yeah, I mean it is like sometimes a bit hard to like follow and also like get excited with like the regular season when you're like, oh yeah, over half these guys are gonna be in the postseason anyway. But just like to watch from like a tactical or analytical point of view, it's such a super interesting league. And I think Minnesota are like a great example of that because again, like I haven't done any kind of research, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they have one of the lower budgets in the league. Definitely aren't like spending like crazy, but they've got this kind of very defined style of play. Very solid, low block, 5-4-1 when I've seen them. I think super low possession, but then they make the most of whenever they have the ball. Like super into set pieces. I've seen their long throws, amazing stuff. And so I can see definitely, like, I can kind of imagine what profile of a striker Oluwaseyi must be to play in that team. Because yeah, he probably doesn't, like, he's obviously not going to be around like the final third a lot, but he's going to have to make the most of the chances he gets. So yeah, I'm very interested to hear more about him.
Yeah. So all of that is actually right. Minnesota sits in more of a middle block or low block. They're not pressing high. They have rapid players, but again, not a crazy budget. They've done it with sort of a lot of leadership of older guys that have stayed for a long time, but have continued to be excellent. Michael Boxall, big Kiwi center back, who's sort of the epitome of sort of like leadership and determination and that kind of thing. And they've played with a South African winger, Bongi Olangwane, who is sort of been their outlet. He's very fast. He's kind of bigger than people expect. He's got good ball control, and that had sort of been their outlet. And then with Oluwaseyi coming in, Oluwaseyi essentially had to earn his spot over Timu Puki, who kind of came to Minnesota United, was kind of showed some good things at first. Pookie, I think people never really realized how fast he was. Pookie still had a bit of speed in the tank, but Oluwaseyi sort of came in and showed the ability to maybe understand the role defensively a bit better, and just, I mean, he's so explosive. He is maybe the fastest and most explosive striker in the league, and has continued to improve his sort of both timing and technical ability to turn that into a goal output and return. And so I think I was a little bit surprised because you hear like Villarreal, and I'm like, wow, that's like a Champions League level team, and like that's a big jump for a guy that's, you know, at 25 playing for a Minnesota United team who's been very strong this year, but a guy that's had to sort of scrap and earn his way up and move up in that way. How is that going to fit? And I did some looking, and Villarreal are a team that actually didn't spend a lot of time pressing super high. They spent most time in a low block, but also a good amount of time in a middle block as well. And actually kind of fits. They're replacing Tierno Barry. Now, Oluwaseyi won't provide the same threat in the air as Tierno Barry, because the only one who maybe can is Christian Benteke. So there's not many players that offer this unique threat that Barry has, but he does have the speed. He has maybe even more speed than Barry. And I think they do have the option to, if they want to sign another type of striker at some point or bring in a different profile, that he could actually still fit as a wide player in this setup. He's not the only Canadian player in the team. Tejan Buchanan, formerly New England Revolution and Bruges, among other clubs, is also in the team. So you wonder if there's a bit of a connection there. Buchanan is fast, but also maybe a bit more of a dribbler and a sort of 1v1 sort of creator in that sort of way. So you wonder, these are guys that both play together when they play with the Canadian national team. There could be some synergy there. Again, the Canadian national team has looked different ways, but right now under Marsh, they want to press and they want to transition. And those are things that could be a really good fit in this Villarreal team as they kind of go forward there. So I'm really excited about this move. I think it's a savvy one. It's one that shows Villarreal is switched on, knows their team profile really well. I know Ravi is probably going to like to hear this. I know we always like to give a shout out to Ravi, but I was surprised again to see this sort of player go, oh wow, a college soccer guy going to Villarreal. You don't really expect this, and then you see the profile and you go, oh wow, these guys really are paying attention to how they want to play and what players are used to playing in that way and can make a big impact. And in addition to the things that you do see, where he's incredibly explosive and has been scoring goals for this Minnesota United team, earning his place over guys that are making 3, 4, 5 times his salary, and that's a really impressive thing. And it's great to see a player like that get an opportunity. But I think we move on there from a striker that's kind of making this big move to a striker that is ready to make his jump into the professional game, that has maybe been waiting for this opportunity. Neel, who's the last player that we're going to talk about today?
Yep. So the last one we've got on our list is Francesco Camarda, 2008 born. This one, so yeah, that's even better. Feels great. But he was the youngest debutant in Serie A history at 15 years and 260 days, which also is great. And he joined Milan in 2015, so when he was like 7. And I mean, obviously, I don't know what he was doing when he was 7, but from whenever we have like the publicly available data, he was almost always playing like multiple years above his age level. But he was still impressive. He was still a standout. He's a striker, obviously, so he's a very good goal scoring record. Like at the under 17 level, he's got 11 from 17 games for Italy's under 17s, and in fact, he barely even played much for Milan Futuro, Milan's kind of youth development team, because he was pretty much pushed from the youth levels and then straight into the senior team. They had some injury issues. Then obviously we know Milan haven't had the kind of most straightforward of times recently. Um, but he's like been a super talent in their setup for a few years. People have been really excited, and I think this is an interesting one, not just for, I mean, for like Milan fans, or but also for like Italian football fans in general, because I mean Italy've been really bad at developing domestic youngsters. I mean, we can see that in the national team. We can see that in their kind of performances internationally. Because I mean, those guys qualified for a cricket World Cup before a football World Cup since like 2014. So they're not doing well. But this Milan youth generation has like a few promising guys. There's obviously Camarda, also Kevin Zeroli, Matteo Liberali, who are all kind of gonna get their senior breakthroughs now. So it's maybe a kind of a new chapter starting for them. And Camarda is very much one of the poster boys. So he's now gone off to Lecce. It's a loan with an option to buy, but this is one of those amazing Italian deals. So it's a season-long loan. Lecce have a 3 million buy option, and then if they exercise it, Milan have a 4 million buyback option. So it's just kind of an elaborate kind of loan deal basically, because Milan can pretty much get him back for like 1 million at the end of it all if they want to. But I think it's a great move for him, because like he's pretty much guaranteed to get like regular starting time now. He's going to be their main striker, because Lecce sold their other guys. They just sold Kristovic to Atalanta for 25 million. So a good deal for them. Obviously, Atalanta had the money from the Retegui sale to El Ghazi in Saudi Arabia. So obviously, maybe they might sign another guy, but for now, it looks like Camarda has that starting spot very open, and I would back him to take it for various reasons. For one, like just because of what an exciting player he is, and like I think the interesting thing with him is obviously he played multiple years above at the youth level, but even then he was like a standout physically. Certainly, like towards the end when I saw him at like under 17s, under 19s. But it's often with those kinds of players who like super tall or much quicker than the guys around them at the youth level, they have issues like translating into the senior level, because all of a sudden all of that physical advantage is gone. In fact, you might even be a bit weaker or slower than some of the guys around you. But I'd like to think that won't happen with Camarda, because what really stood out to me was not his pace or his like strength, but like the intelligence of his movement. So he makes really clever runs into both channels, also into the box. He's got a good presence. Obviously, he was good in the air. I think he still can be to a decent extent, but with his kind of tall and strong build, I think there's enough there for him to hold his own physically at the senior level. And then it's with this kind of movement that he can really make a name for himself. And yeah, like I liked his kind of movement, his runs in behind, his runs into the box, also his ability to get shots off with both feet. And also, I mean, he, at least in the matches I saw, he wasn't someone who really involved himself much in the build up. Like I said, he's making the runs to attack space and behind or create space. But whenever he did get the ball, I think he did well enough to kind of just hold it up, or lay it off to someone around him. So I think he has like all the basic qualities you want to see. And yeah, like as long as I think he can get shots off, which he did obviously very well at the youth level, I think he's someone who's going to have a good season. Also, because Lecce, I think, will be an interesting team with a new head coach in Eusebio Di Francesco, who's maybe not like the most highly rated guy in Italy. I mean, I think he got relegated both of the last seasons from Serie A, but his teams don't play like the typical kind of what you think of an Italian lower table team, low block, and bore everyone to death. Uh, they actually do like to have a bit of the ball. I especially remember his Frosinone team from 23-24, where they were actually like mid-table for goals, but they just conceded a lot and ultimately got relegated on the final day. It was very close, but they had a lot of fun players up front. They had Caio Jorge, who was like a young Brazilian striker. Then he's back at Cruzeiro now, doing well for them, and Walid Khedira, the Moroccan guy who's lighting up Serie B. I was really excited for him at the World Cup, and then he did horrendously. But now he's at Napoli, so he's done well for himself. But what I'm trying to say is, I think the Francesco's teams are kind of like to have a good deal of the ball and have these kind of varied profiles of strikers, young strikers, different kinds of strikers. So I think Camarda will definitely get like a good setup around him. When I look at Lecce's squad, I'm not too sure about that midfield, but I think there's some fun wingers there to support him. So he probably should get a decent amount of service. But yeah, I'd like to see what he can do for himself, the kind of runs he can make, the kind of shots he can get off for himself, because that was really good at the youth level. And yeah, I mean, he could be. He could be the big answer to many of the questions, not just for Milan, but also for Italy. I mean, they need a young striker. So yeah, he's definitely going to be one to watch for a lot of people in Serie A.
Yeah, Syria already is probably, I think we sort of talked earlier when I spoke with Patrick, is like really the league that could be the most exciting coming into this year. Wide open at the top of the table. I think sometimes with Syria A, the bottom of the table, it feels like there's a team that gets cut adrift earlier. But I think that sort of started to change. I think there's been, we've obviously seen with Venezia and maybe Monza, some of these teams that have been a little bit more bubble teams between Serie A, Serie B, bottom half of Serie A, that there's kind of growing ideas of investment there, chances to grow. Obviously, the most exciting being Como, but I think hopefully that's something that's continuing to change, that Serie A can really be, it's already this league that has a lot of diversity of styles and very interesting players, but if that relegation battle can start to heat up, and if this can be a guy, if you can get a young striker like that all of a sudden and get yourself an extra season in Serie A, there's real opportunity there. So that would be great to see. Well, Neil, this has been really good. I really enjoyed this. I'm getting even more excited. I think now I've got a list of teams that I want to get my eyes on, players I want to see how they sort of do over the next couple of weeks and months. But thank you so much for joining me here today. And yeah, we'll look forward. I'm not sure when we'll get to do the next Neil and Hayden episode, but I've really enjoyed the ones this week and look forward to doing it again. So thank you for your time, Neil.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure for me as well. I think we just forgot to say one thing, one important thing, which is we have to put officially Patrick Van Straten on Hate Watch, on Fraud Watch rather, not on Hate Watch. We've seen people saying he's disappeared right when Reinders dropped a good performance. So next week Patrick's probably going to be back. I look forward to his response then.
Yeah, will be interesting. I think Patrick wanted a little bit of sample size. He said I'm not going to take the heat after just one performance. He wants to see Reinders play, especially against a team like a Tottenham,
Oh
a
yeah.
European level team, and see a bit of a sample size. So yeah, I think that will be a great thing to keep an eye on. And again, what will it be with Reinders? Like obviously the price tag was very big, but yeah, how will it all fit together? Again, we sort of spoke about it. We spoke about it the other day, like with Cherki, with Reinders, with Marmoush. There's a lot of guys that could kind of come in here and do that, let alone Doku, Foden, these other players, Bernardo Silva that they have. How that attack is actually going to look is a big question. And if you're Reinders, you feel like, well, you paid this much money. Let's see what this guy can actually do. So yeah, we'll see how Patrick answers to that. If you do want to comment on, please leave in the comments what you thought about Reinders so far and what you're looking forward to seeing for him against
Uh,
Tottenham
and,
Hotspur.
and Patrick has
Neil,
to answer all the comments on Monday. All the best, Patrick.
oh, that'll be great. Yeah. Well, he won't talk to me anymore now after this ending here. But yeah. Anyways, Neil, thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
to everyone watching, yes, please like, subscribe, and we will catch you next time. Cheers. Bye.